beautiful gumdrops. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. This is Candy. This is going to be the start of the new series that I'm going to be doing, which is called Reasons. And this is a crossover with Hunter x Hunter, crossover with My Hero Academia. And I really think that you guys are going to enjoy the series. Get started. This is part 1 of Reasons. Just awake. As soon as you came to your consciousness, you were well aware of the soreness all over your body. You groaned, shifting uncomfortably as your eyes opened. Where were you? The last thing you could remember was falling through the sky with the weird spell card. Were you dead? Was this the afterlife? No, you were clearly on a hospital bed hooked up to various machines. And despite the soreness and pounding headache, you didn't see any outstanding injuries. Using your Ren had protected you more than you thought it would. Were you still on Grid Island, or had you been ejected out of? If you were, it'd be a pain to get back in. But you promised Gon and Killua you would help them, especially since you had nothing else to do at the time. As Gon's unofficial older sister, considering his aunt basically adopting you, you felt like it was your duty to watch over him, after all. Sitting up and wincing at the stiffness of your muscles, you took in your surroundings. Your clothes were folded neatly on a table. They were torn up and dirty, but still wearable, and in the place of your clothes was a paper-thin hospital gown. Your phone? Not nearly as good in condition. It had been in your pocket and now lied broken with a crunched up mess besides your clothes. Having been placed in a plastic bag for protection, you doubt it was still repairable, meaning you'd have to buy a new one again. At least you remembered some phone numbers, right? If you could find a payphone, you could call Killua before he went back into the game to tell him what was going on. Behind the table sat a large window, the curtains drawn from. What you could see, you were definitely in the city, and the buildings weren't the same as the game. So your best guess was that you were in New York New, but, well, some things were off. But you just couldn't place it. Immediately your head jerked to the door, hearing hushed voices behind it. You tilted your head to the side, groaning impatient as the door remained closed. There were people standing right outside your door, and try as you might, you just couldn't pick up what they were saying. Were they going to come in? You didn't have all day to just lie here, but you also knew that it would only cause more trouble if you ripped everything off and left. Finally, as sensing your ever-growing impatience, the door opened, revealing an odd trio of people. The first was a disapproving nurse who didn't look very pleased that your rest was being interrupted. The next was somebody who looked like a police officer of some sorts. And the last was a tired, grumpy-looking man who seemed like he hadn't slept for days. "Ah, you're awake. Pardon the intrusion." The policeman apologized, bowing, causing you to nod in return. The nurse quickly headed to you, checking to see if everything was all right. You ignored the two visitors for the time being, focusing on the nurse's questions as she took your vitals. "You should definitely be resting more, but well, Detective Tsukachi wanted to ask you some questions about what happened and insisted it was important." "I'm sorry." She apologized to you. You gave her a bright smile and nodded your head. "I'll be fine. Thank you, though." The two visitors one more glance, she patted your cheek before leaving the room. Your voice had come out kind of dry. You weren't sure how long you had been out for, but it was only now that you realized how your throat was so dry. Without missing a beat, you asked the two men if one of them could grab you a drink. And with the tired-looking man left, moments later he came back with a can of juice. You didn't hesitate to rip it open. It was an awkward silence, nobody saying anything until you put down the empty can, wiping your mouth on your arm. Finally, the detective guy spoke up, pulling up a chair next to your bed so you could sit down. with a small notepad and pen. I know you're still recovering, but I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. My name is Detective Sukachi, and the man who found you is Eraserhead. Can you tell me? Eraserhead? That's a weird name, but I am friends with. So you decide, Well, I was playing the game Green Island, right? You know, the one with the few copies that are existing right now? Anyways, the game is super complicated. But, like, you get these spell cards, and there was this one I didn't recognize, so I activated it, and next thing you know, I'm separated from my friends and falling through the sky. I have no idea how I winded up here, though, out of all places. You didn't see a reason not to tell the truth, so you spilled your guts out to the detective, who looked somewhat disconcerted at your weird admission. Did he not hear of Green Island, or... You wouldn't be too surprised since it wasn't that popular. If that was the case, you were not going to explain all of the rules and everything to him. It was just too much to get into. Besides, you weren't entirely sure if he even understood most of that game. You just went with the flow. Right. What's your name, young lady? When? And how old are you? 16, sir. And where are your parents? You flattered before shrugging. I don't know. I grew up without them, but I was raised by my friend's Aunt Mito on Whale Island, so I guess she'd be my parent. Detective Sukiyachi and Eraserhead shared a look that you couldn't quite read, and you finally decided to ask them a question in return. So, where am I? Am I back at York New? You waited as the detective Sukiyachi seemed to ponder over his words for a moment, seeming confused at your choice of words. York New? No, you're currently in Matsutofu, he said, seeing your... He then proceeded to tap on a pin he had that said Japan, as if it would clear some things up. You're pretty good with geography of the known world, but never in your life have you heard of a place called Matsufu or Japan, unless there were smaller places located in the United States of Sahirata or something like that. Sensing your confusion, Eraserhead decided to spare you from your brain hurting by asking a question himself. He sounded kind of gruffy, and your attention was fully towards him now. The nurse said nobody healed you, so how did you heal? When I found you, you were a bloody mess, but now you don't even have a scratch on you. Oh, my friend didn't save me, but it's pretty interesting that I healed while I was sleeping. Was it my Hatsu ability subconsciously activated? It was possible, but I didn't. That at least answered one of my questions, but the second one? You didn't even know where to start. What did he mean by quirk? You were at a loss of words, and you also decided to be honest. The entire situation was just growing weird, and all you wanted to do was leave these two and go find a payphone to tell Killua to tell Gon that you were alright. I have absolutely no idea by what you mean quirk, but I can heal myself. You weren't going to get into Nen with two strangers who apparently had no clue what it was. And the detective seemed miffed at your short sentence. Not like he didn't believe you, though, but more so in disbelief that you were being honest. Once again, you're growing impatient. Okay, is that all? I really need to get back to my friends. Despite how rude your words came out, the guy interrogating you was full of patience, and looked once over again to Eraserhead before running a hand through his head. If anything, he just looked baffled. You are telling the truth, but I'm having a hard time believing it. You appreciated his trust in you, but you were a little concerned at how trusting he was, considering he was a detective. If all policemen were like this, no wonder they had no chance capturing petty thieves, let alone the phantom truth. Good things hunters existed because your faith in the law enforcement was absolute. What did Killua once say? ACAB? You were unsure how to really respond, but thankfully he spoke up once again. I'm sorry we're keeping you one, but you appeared out of a black hole in the middle of the sky and created a crater in the middle of the city. There's no record of you anywhere in our system, and you've completely healed from fatal injuries. We're just a little concerned you might be a villain. That was certainly a lot of information for your brain to take in due to its current state. What? You try to reason with how you would respond or approach the man's words. I'm a hunter, first of all, not a villain. And if you don't believe me, my license is probably in one of my pockets. You said, shaking your head. I don't know why I'm not showing up, but well known, one of my abilities allows me to heal myself pretty quickly. It probably just activated when I was knocked out. Neither men reacted when you said the word hunter. No apologies, no shocked looks. If anything, they look like they've never heard that word or term before. And before, you had been able to brush it off, but something most certainly wasn't right. The Depture card deposited you some. Sorry, but you said we are Matsufu, Japan, right? Where is that? In Yoribuzon or Aezion continent? Both men once again seemed stumped at your question, and now concerned as if you had just grown another head. Continent? Japan is part of Asia. That made no sense. Never in your life had you heard of this So either these guys were messing with you or something was really wrong now. Was it possible you had winded up in a different world? Was that even possible? Were you dead? Or was it just some weird portal you got? You were panicking, a step away from hyperventilating, as he looked at the two men with scared, widened eyes. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be here. Sensing your panic, Detective Sukiyachi placed a hand on your arm in an attempt to comfort you. He didn't look like he knew any more than you did, but he remained calm. You nodded, and in a few minutes you were calmed back down again. Once you showed that your panicking had passed, the detective removed his hand, placing the notepad he had out back into his pockets. Wan-san, can you explain more where you're from? You did. Maybe it was just the anxiety, but you spilled everything, talking about where you grew up with Gon and the hunter exams, to York New City and the Phantom Troop. You vaguely mentioned Nen and ended your long, widened explanation with Great Island and the Depture spell card that winded you up here. During your frantic explanation, you had watched the two faces for any sign of recognition, but they showed none. Eraserhead, for the most part, remained pretty stoic, although he was now excruciating you and clearly not believing a word you said. The detective, Sukiyachi, seemed completely, utterly baffled. Neither of them had a clue on what you said, and acted like you were just saying something in another language.
Listen, kid, I don't know what you're trying to do, but...
It's true. Detective Sukiyachi cut Eraserhead off, awe creeping into his voice. He wholeheartedly believed you, which was good because you were pretty sure you were nowhere in the known world. You had heard about the Dark Continent from reading history books, but you doubted you were in neither. If you were there, then there would have been something you at least recognized, but there was nothing. Eraserhead turned his full attention to Detective Sukiyachi, in disbelief showing in his features, but he didn't oppose him.
If this girl is saying the truth, then...
He trailed off. Both men turned to look at you. How did you respond? Of course you were saying the truth. At this point, you were just growing impatient. And even worse, you were more worried. How were you supposed to get back? With Gon and Killua, how were they supposed to know where you were? You couldn't stand the silence, and you quickly spoke. I'm not in the known world, am I? Your voice came out soft, wavering almost, but you had to keep strong. What would Gon and Killua say if they saw you like this? You could already hear Killua's mean comment and Gon's blunt way of trying to cheer you up. So take a deep breath. You summarized everything that was going on. So you took all the courage you had in you and looked up to the two men. What does this mean for me? Neither of them seemed to know how to answer you, and the detective seemed to hesitate before finally answering your question. You had already suspected it. You weren't stupid, but hearing it was a whole different story. It's hard to even think this, Wyan-san, but I don't think you're even in your world anymore. Things just... Great, now you were stranded in a whole different world you had no idea about, with no money, no friends, no phone, and no place to stay, where you apparently didn't even exist. You had been through some pretty tough situations, but this most certainly took the cake. A few minutes later of awkward silence, the detective came back, scratching the back of his neck. He looked over to Eraserhead. There's somebody else coming, but we have a bit of a problem. He didn't even need to say the problem, as Eraserhead's face... You tilted your head in confusion. What does the media have to do with any of this? You asked. Eraserhead just looked at you, letting a long, suffering sigh, putting his hand to his head, as if he was fighting off an oncoming migraine. When you fell from the sky, you attract a lot of attention. It's no wonder the reporters are waiting outside of the hospital just to get a scoop about what happened to you and who you are. You didn't really find a problem with this, honestly. You had your fair share of attention, so why? The detective did mention that Eraserhead was a hero, so shouldn't he be used to it? Dealing with the media if he's saving people and such. You weren't going to question it, though, having... Like how you were supposed to get out of this stupid hospital. You hated being cooped up. It's almost like being locked up was a literal nightmare. You knew if you tried anything, the two men would have stopped you, and honestly, you had no clue how powerful their powers must be if apparently Nen didn't exist here. What did they have again? Quirks? Whatever they were, right on time, somebody else walked in. A tiny rat wearing a suit and a permanent smile on his face. Okay then, where's Oma? The detective Sukiyachi was the first to speak to the little rat person thing. As he went to go sit in his chair, he got caught up by the press. You didn't know who All Might was, but the two other adults nodded in understanding, as if it was something common, maybe a popular person. The rat person turned to you, still smiling. Miss Wyan, correct? I'm Nezu, the principal of UA High School. I know you're probably wondering what I am, but I assure you nobody else is sure either. Detective Sukiyoshi filled me in a bit of your current situation. If what you're saying is true, you would have no place to stay or go, right? You hesitantly nodded, a frown tugging downwards. I don't really know how to get back to my world either. It hurt even worse saying that part out loud, but you couldn't lie. That wouldn't help you get back at all, and it wouldn't improve your situation. Nezu nodded as if he expected it, and he nodded once, looking certain for his next words. And boy, did they throw you in for a loop. Well, you see, the school year just started here, but until you can get back to your world, I'd like you to consider joining the hero course at our school. If you were there, you would be provided a place to stay, and
you would keep all your secrets safe, with a few pro-heroes, of course. You mulled over his words, and as he continued speaking, seeing the interest on your face, did they tell you about our quirks? You hesitated. Technically, it was mentioned, but you had no idea on what it was still. So you shook your head, and Nezu nodded, again as if he expected the response all along. A quirk is super powerful sorts. Detective Tsukiyachi said that you had a healing ability. Here, that would be called a quirk. You finally decided to speak up again, cutting him off. There was something personable about Nezu that made you feel more at ease. Maybe it was the matter of fact speaking the way he was and explaining everything to you. Or maybe it was the fact that he believed you wholeheartedly. This wasn't treating you like a ticking time bomb from a different world. Whatever the reason was, it made you feel more comfortable and relaxed. And you had no problem explaining to him about that. My abilities aren't just healing myself. I can heal myself, but it's not like I'm limited to that. Your voice came out unsure, almost rushed, as if you tried to think of an explanation to somebody who never heard of Nen before in their life. There are 5 categories of Nen. I fall under the enhancer category. Nen could be used to maybe run faster or punch harder. Special Nen abilities are called Hatsu. Mine allows me to heal myself when I go into a state of meditation. It also allows me to boost my other capabilities, so like enhance my senses, strength, speed, so not just healing. You really sucked at explaining things. But thankfully Nezu understood, or at least he had an idea of what Nen could be, because he nodded again, glancing at the other two. This is quite predicament in the situation you are. I understand it might be a little bit overwhelming here, Miss Wen, but I do believe it is at your best interest to stay at UA under the eyes of heroes for the time being. Damn, this talking rat, no offense to Nezu, as if he had nothing to do with you, but he talked better than you. However, you couldn't help but catch the tone in his voice, signaling that you might be something more. Or maybe it was his wording? Under the eyes of pro-heroes. They seemed to be wanting you to be safe, but at the same time, it seemed to signal something else. Like they were suspicious of you. Like you were some criminal or bandit, which you truly weren't. I can't really say I blame them, you mused. Besides, despite the nice words and offers, you had a feeling this wasn't really your choice to make. You nodded in determination, setting across your face. Don't get the wrong idea. You were still afraid. Afraid of what? You could never see your friends again? Or go home to the world you always grew up in? Afraid you were stranded for good? But you couldn't let that bring you down. You were 16 years old, no longer a child, which meant you needed to suck it up and play the cards and deal with it. This could be a fun experience anyways, right? I'll do it, Mr. Nezu. Sign me up for the hero course. Over the next few hours, a group had all discussed about what was going on for your protection, and they also could probably keep you under surveillance. While you waited, you also found out that people prefer to be called by their last names instead of their first names. This world was so weird. Why did people insist on going by their last names here? Well, once you were done with the situation, you filled out your paperwork to continue your transfer to UA. You found out you would be staying at a dorm, whatever that was. Never heard about dorms, but it could be better than staying on the streets, for sure. So you had really nothing to bring with you, and Racer had basically agreed to drive you to UA. so you can meet the other students and get settled in.
So, when you've attended a school before, correct? Actually, no. I've never had to deal with classes or school. Not ever. At least Aunt Mito, when back in my world, we don't really have school. You've never been to a school before? Being brought back to reality, you stared at the detective, and by his outburst, even Nezu seemed a bit surprised, tilting his head to the side, waiting for your explanation of your lack of education. Flushing, you quickly explained it wasn't a big problem in your world. I mean, Aunt Mito taught me and Gon, and we left to go take a hunter exam and to find Gon's dad, so we never enrolled in actual school, you told them. It didn't mean you weren't stupid. You just had different strengths. Growing up practically in the wild was homeschooled, so you never really had to go to school before. You had several skills which were way more important than learning about history, about the world, and finding an area with new shapes. You were now confused, and you looked over to Nazi's paper to see what he was writing, your nose scrunched up in confusion. What the hell are you writing? You didn't mean to blurt it out so rudely. The detective looked about ready to scold you for the words you chose and your tone, but you weren't sure, probably both. The detective took a deep breath before exhaling. Can you not read? You crossed your arms, unimpressed. Of course I can read. I assumed if we speak the same language, we would probably write it in the same letters, but I don't recognize any of those characters at all. Nazu nodded again. He seemed to understand at your lack of knowledge when it came to reading and writing. Well, I assume we will have to put extra classes so you can keep up with the other students. And of course you won't have a problem with it because you really don't have anything else to do. Well, of course you didn't have anything else to do. You had to be at school 24/7. So you couldn't really argue with this. So you agreed. Fine, whatever. It doesn't really matter. And I am assuming tomorrow we can choose what you will use for your quirk. So I'm thinking because you did fall from a high altitude, you might want to rest. As soon as that was said, there was a knock at the door. It seemed it was a nurse as she walked in. I'm sorry to interrupt, but it looks like our patient went in. She might want some rest and alone time. So I will nicely ask you all to leave and I will escort you out. And we have solved the situation with the media, so there will be no one to interrupt her. Well, I'm guessing tomorrow she'll have to start coming to UA. But I'll take her if you want me to, Nezu. Alright then, it's settled. Mr. Aizawa will take you to UA tomorrow in the morning, and you will be all set to go, and you will meet all your classmates and your tutors. So hopefully you can have a good rest, and I will meet you again tomorrow morning. Okay, if that's all, I would like to escort you out this way. They all soon left your room. The room was silent. You didn't know how to feel. But boy, was tomorrow gonna be a day. At least it was time for them to leave. But you were kinda upset you couldn't leave yet. Hopefully Gon and Killua were doing alright. You ended up taking one more glance out the window and decided it was time to hit the hay, so you closed your eyes as you tried to go to sleep. Hi, so that was part 1 of Reasons, and that was a MHA Hunter x Hunter crossover, so I hope you enjoyed that, and I'm guessing these parts/episodes are gonna be like more longer than the personality change ones, because they have a lot of more to like fold out and basically say. So yeah, and part 12 of personality change will be out soon, so yeah. So keep a lookout for that. And I also want to start the other series, which is the MHA series crossover with Haikyuu, so I might actually do that one too for fun. And yeah, I really hope you're having a great day. Stay healthy, stay positive, and I love every single one of you, and thank you so much for all the people and support I've been getting. And yeah, bye.